are my friends. Come along with me, see how the story ends.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Professional Hippies. You have your regular host. I hope we're not disappointing you on that. We want to live up to all your expectations, and if you can live up to ours, we'll drop our Venmo at the end. Just kidding. Hey, today we have a special guest for you. I hope you've been enjoying this series where we're bringing on guests, people we're really excited to talk about and share our platform with them as well. And today we have none other than Kenneth. Well, as we'll get into his aliases, I'm sure there's four we discussed before the airing, maybe at least three, but Kenneth Donahue. And Ken, if you don't mind, I'll just do like a little bit of the formal introduction for you. I love the bio you sent over. Is that cool?
Sure. ChatGPT helped me out with that. I was like, hey, Chat, write me a bio.
That's why it's so polished, right? So a little snippet.
I was like, no, I don't need to say that one, Chat. Like, let's rewrite that, please.
We'll leave out your OnlyFans. But for now, we'll go with as a transformational coach, certified psychedelic integration guide, and a top producing San Diego realtor. Once a festival DJ, I love that we got to connect on that. He's now on a mission to help others align with their future selves and design dream-driven lives. From climbing out of 50K in debt to earning six figures, Kendo's journey blends real-world hustle with deep inner healing, with roots in personal development, plant medicine integration, which I hope you guys can appreciate, and conscious business. He empowers others to create breakthroughs from the inside out, authentically, ethically, and intentionally. Hey, man, I love what you're bringing to the world, and I love, just the fact that you carved out some time for us. And without further ado, welcome to the show, brother. Good to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. This is really cool.
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
Cool
Absolutely. Man, when we connected before, it's like we ran into each other on the playa. It was like one of those flashbacks. Dylan, I didn't get to share that with you, but fellow burner here, and the DJ connection and stuff. So, I mean, take us back, take us forward. I know there's kind of the real estate mark, but also psychedelics as of late have caught your ear and intention. So, what's going on there? How'd you get started in real estate, or whatever thread you feel like is kind of pertinent to pull on? But how did you arrive to kind of this current crossroads you find yourself in?
Oh man, how long did you say this podcast was? This is a long story. I did resonate when I didn't know you reached out to people in this mastermind group we're a part of, and you're like, hey, I'm looking for this. This is the name of my podcast, and I was like, oh, that's me. I'm a professional hippie. And when we chatted for the first time, I was just like, oh wow, you have that in common too. Oh wow, okay. So, once you said you got married on the playa, I was just like, oh, that's how serious you are into this space,
We bleed hippie around here.
Yeah. So my Burning Man years were, 06 to 2012. And I was all in during that time.
By the way, were they bitching about stuff changing then too?
There's always stuff changing. Yeah, you would hear people like your first year out there, you get like a little art car ride from somebody who's been there 20 years on the playa, like, oh, we used to be able to shoot guns over there, and you're just like
rifle range, at 9 o'clock.
Yeah. We used to have a drive-by gallery, and you're just like, dude, I was like, I don't need that, but thank you for letting me know, as we're floating down the playa on your bed here. Yeah, it's good. And it's interesting being in this space now too, because like people who are just being turned on to Burning Man, you're just like, oh yeah, those are those years for me. They're not like, it's kind of like a past life now or an old chapter, but I think that's kind of what got me into the space I'm in now, as far as like psychedelic integration coaching and being in a professional space around it. Is once I kind of gave up that DJing lifestyle and was like wanting some, financial security, that it wasn't paying my bills. So it was paying my bills, but like not very effectively,
You wanted bigger bills to be able to pay for.
Right. I wanted that mortgage. Like I didn't have that, And so I went pro, and I have like some old DJ music producers that saw like my first headshot. They're like, bro, you went pro. And I think, but when I did that and I joined things like Emerge and GoBundance and other masterminds, you start seeing these professionals who are like wanting to do psychedelics and explore psychedelics or go to their first burn or whatnot. And then they would just start picking my brain, asking me questions, or I would show up for them after they did a journey and I'll just sit there and I'll be like, yeah, tell me about it, man. I'm here. And I didn't know that there was a profession to do that. I didn't know you could call yourself a psychedelic integration coach and you just sit there and listen to people's trips and help them process it and take the big takeaways and solidify them and be like, hey, this is where you could go now with your life, or with this is how you could integrate that into your new way of being now that you've experienced that.
Yeah, that's kind of the cool part about it too, is that I think as it's becoming more mainstream, and we can even talk about things like Burning Man where that's going more mainstream, but it's introducing people to a whole different avenue of looking at the world and what's possible from it.
Yeah, it's funny that, I mean, it's not Coachella, so it can't be that mainstream, you know?
Well, I mean, it's also it's called a project for a reason, right? It's always being worked on. It's always being changing. And one thing that just pops in my head too, because it all depends on what happens out there based on whoever wants to take on the responsibility of doing it. And so when someone's like, oh, this used to be out here, but they don't have it out here anymore. It's like, well, yeah, that person just decided to stop leading that project. They were like, if someone else wants it, they could do it. And then no one else took it on. So now someone else came in with a whole nother avenue of fun time out there. And so there's constantly things updating.
Right. We get smarter as humans, right? We're like, hey, maybe that's not the safest thing to have out there anymore.
Well, it's like also too, where I've heard of people saying like, oh, we used to have bands out here, drum kits and guitar and all that. And now there's more DJs. Well, yeah, it's kind of a lot harder to bring out all that other equipment, whereas you can have a DJ out here that can do all the drums and the guitars right there with the press of a button. A lot easier than bringing all the other equipment out here.
Very true. And there's a lot of bands that have went, like, it's hard to keep a band together.
Yeah.
Right. And so like they're like, oh,
especially by the third day.
Amen, brother. And there's bands out there too. I mean, I think you always find what you're looking for. The people when they're gripe and complain, especially about like the plug and play camps, and not to make this like a Burning Man dominant conversation, but objectively, that's fun. Objectively, to just show up, be able to lose your mind for a week and not have to worry about setup and cleanup. And people are like, you got to earn your stripes. And it's like, I'd honestly rather not. Been there, done it. I'm good on it, and to kind of point it back to like what you're itching at there, especially with more developed professionals. Some people, the idea of going to like a desert in a sweat hut and meeting your creator on, 3 cups of San Pedro may not be like the most illustrious thing that you could do with your life to find out your higher calling. Like different people need different things. I think that's the cool part about where psychedelic integration's at these days. We have conferences like the MAPS conference coming up in Denver here soon, where it's like cross-pollination of ideas, industries, leaders. I think it's a really cool thing.
Mm-hmm.
The conversation has developed, and it's important to hit the conversations from all angles, right? Like I think a lot of hippie culture, was just to go have a good time. And now we could hit it from that part of like, well, how does it help our business grow, as far as like, Steve Jobs doing some psychedelics, and now we have Apple computers we're talking on, like, and other, there's so many stories like that where now we could, and then there's the healing elements of it too. It's like, oh, how do you, and I think that has evolved the conversation. Then, hey, let's just go have a good time, to like, hey, we might be able to become better humans by using psychedelics.
Did you feel that for yourself? Was there kind of like a shift from just having a good time with psychedelics to like, oh man, there's intention here? Or did you just kind of start out from the jump of like, because for me, it was kind of self-medicating. I didn't realize that, because sometimes you're forced to look at shit you don't want to look at. That might just be an objective. If you're taking psychedelics, at some point you will be forced to look at shit, and either you're not having a good time or you're going to deal with the shit. But I don't know if that's just me or just like a blanketed thing.
I have a hard time making absolutes, like that's going to absolutely happen to somebody, but I say the odds are in our favor, you know, that you know, there's people who probably, I guess there's still people who are probably unwilling to look at their stuff when it comes up.
Mm.
And then when it did come up, like, hey, we're out here to go to, you know, if it's a music festival, we're going to try this for the first time. We're going to just have a good time versus like, are you even paying attention to that conversation that you're having off to the side if with yourself or your friend, or, you know, let's say if it's MDMA, did you notice that heart connection, or were you just dancing your face off?
Yeah.
You know? And I think for people who are evolving or wanting to do self-medication, or like you said, you didn't know it at the time, there was a lot of that like self-healing through that process. Even if it, like, I kind of have a hard time when you say recreational, because I'm just like, dude, that might be what people considered that I was doing all those years, but I know that I was doing some deep healing at the same time, you know?
Is that how you kind of got into DJing?
Oh man, I realized recently I've always been into music. I just moved to storage unit. I had like a whole bunch of CDs and cassette tapes and vinyl that I was just like, it's just been in the storage unit for a while since I bought this condo because I didn't want to bring it in here. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I think I've always been into music. And I think that was just the next evolution of me was DJing. I was doing a lot of poetry, spoken word, and then someone DJ'd for me as I did that and taught me a couple of things on the turntables at the time, you know, when we used to use turntables. And then a pair of turntables moved into my house as a roommate. And I started practicing while they were gone. And we had, you know, back in the day, you just have these little house parties. And he's like, hey, I'm looking for this record. I knew exactly where the record was at. I was like, how did you know where it was at? I was like, oh, I don't know. It's like, all right, your turn. And then the whole party was just like, whoa, what are you doing? And it's like, I think maybe this is just, I'm good at it, you know, naturally good at it. Being able to, and going to a lot of music shows and festivals and concerts, that was like a pastime of mine for a long time. And I would see how bands and DJs could move the crowd, and I watched how they controlled the crowd in a sense. And so that's kind of where I focus on. If I could take people through a journey through sound that had a message of consciousness and love, that I could hit a bigger audience than just doing some spoken word poetry at a coffee shop.
Never underestimate the power of some spoken words at a coffee shop, though.
No doubt.
Spoken words for DJs. Everybody put your hands up.
Yeah.
It's a different version. You talk about moving a crowd, right? And like affecting their journey through it. I'm just curious, did you ever have a point where you went in with a game plan and the game plan wasn't working and you had to kind of pivot during your set and like be like, ooh, like the crowd's not feeling this, I need to go this direction? Or did you always kind of go in and be like, I have to stick to it, the crowd will feel it, you know, they'll get through the journey? I'm just curious on that.
Yes and yes. There's times where you have to change it up that they're not feeling it, right? And you have to change that direction. I guess as you
sometimes you're like, no, you're gonna take it, you're gonna like it.
There's times, well, I think like you become prepared, you know your audience, right? Like, and so then you know your audience, you know the promoters, and so you know like what the setting is going to be, and then so you kind of understand where that's at, and then you can kind of navigate. Now, can you take slight turns based off where you're reading the energy? Yes, but there has been times where you're just like, okay, jumping ship, they're not feeling this. But that was like probably more in the early days. Whereas I got more experience and knew what space I was entering, then it just kind of became like, all right, we could cut this one short because they're ready to go here now.
Interesting. Cool.
That to me is like my favorite part about DJing is having the opportunity to influence someone subconsciously in a way where it's like if you see they're not reacting to maybe like some house stuff, right? And you take a acapella track from a song that you know the crowd knows and probably will respond to, and layer that on to maybe something that isn't in their forte, or maybe this crowd traditionally wouldn't vibe with. You kind of cross blend these different genres of music, and then you start to see the head bobs come in and the hips start to come in. I love being able to do that. Because unlike you, I think Dylan can definitely attest. I don't know that I was a natural at DJing when I started.
Out of
It was just something I enjoyed doing and kind of imposed on others because no one else wanted the aux. But having those moments is really, really cool.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a lot to be said about having that moment and capturing that moment, and then being able to influence people to have their own moments.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah, like I saw a video today where they were talking about it's some club in Denver where the DJ is up away from the crowd because now everyone like focuses on the DJ, right? Like you go to a scene, the DJ is kind of the center of focus, and I think production has a lot to do with that, right? You bring in lasers and a giant LED screen and stuff, but I wonder if there's going to be a bit of a renaissance of a DJ being kind of tucked away and turning the crowd back in to each other, because that used to be a thing, and for whatever reason we just kind of gravitated towards the altar of the DJ these days, you know.
lasers, unfortunately, will do that.
yeah,
Fortunately.
yeah. Well-timed laser is awesome, you know. But I've been to situations or rooms where the DJ wasn't necessarily the center of attention, and I think it really depends on the scene. I think yes, we've gotten stage focused, but even when the stage is focused, there's still those people willing to turn around and dance with you.
For sure.
I think we just kind of. I wonder how much of that is all marketing as well.
That's a fair point. I mean, don't get me wrong. If I was playing to a crowd of like 1,500, 2,000 people in a club and they all paid $60, $80 to see me, I might want to feel like hot shit. I might want everyone to look at me the whole time.
Put the sound guy up on the stage, put the DJ in the back, see what happens.
Yeah, put the VX guy on the stage mashing all the buttons for the production.
See what happens.
I've seen it. I definitely have seen it.
Huh? You seen someone group do that? How did that look? How did that work out?
Didn't really know what was going on at the time, but but figured it out later on.
So Ken, tell me a little bit more about where you're at with currently with the psychedelic integration. I mean, how's that been going? How long you been doing that now?
This is a new venture for me. Mm-hmm. That's a new venture for 2025. I didn't even know it was a thing. And I didn't even know that I was really, really going to enter it with so much enthusiasm. Did I just make up a word or mispronounce a word?
That's how new words get made, brother.
Yeah. And so I guess, last year I knew I was going to step into the coaching space. I knew that there was a calling inside me that was leading me that direction. I guess and I've now explored that there's a true self in us all that kind of guides our ship, right? It kind of is the direction that we're always going. Us or the ego could be like the one trying to sabotage it or get in the way or have all the doubt or whatnot. But the self is like, this is where we're going. This is where we're going. And eventually it speaks so loudly that you have to follow it after so much resistance. And so I knew people have told me, even when I was doing real estate, and I think I even mentioned it in my early real estate years, like my first year in real estate. I was like, no, you know what? I didn't even know being a coach was a thing. And then also I was like, you know what? I think that's the direction I'm going. And last year I finally accepted the call, and people told me I'd be good at it for a long time. I listened to a lot of personal development books, and so I did a challenge with Dr. Benjamin Hardy, who has a whole bunch of good books. And in that you had to like do some future self kind of visualizing. And when I visualized that, I saw this future of me helping others live their dreams or pursue their goals. And real estate wasn't part of the picture. And so when I finally saw that vision, I finally accepted the calling. And by the end of that, my coaching challenge was to launch my coaching business. And once I did, I realized, oh, I need more skills. I'll jump on a coaching call with somebody and be like, 15 minutes into it, I'll be like, oh man, where's this going? Like, what am I doing? Mm-hmm. And so I knew I needed more skills. And at the same time where people were asking me, hey, I would like to have my first psychedelic experience, or people were asking me about my microdosing protocols, this company was reaching out to me that does psychedelic integration training for coaches. And they're recruiting me at the same time. And I just saw like, okay, there's a synchronicity. And sometimes that's how the true self is actually talking to you, is by showing you the synchronicities, right? And so I was like, okay, there's an alignment here. There's something happening here. There's 6 people within 2 weeks have asked me about psychedelics and my protocols or where to find a ceremony. And then there's this company reaching out to me at the same time, like saying, hey, we want to train you to do this. And so
it looks like almost a runway. Like it's just like, here's the path right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. And so that happened last year. And then this year is kind of like, all right, let's step into this. Let's own this. Mm-hmm. And I realized, it's something that I have always done. People have asked me, hey, about Burning Man, or they've asked me like, I'm having this big experience, even if it's just like a personal development retreat. They're like, hey, help me put this back together. And I was just like, cool, I'm here. And then just the discovery, like, wait, I could get paid to actually do what I love, like having deep conversations with people. This is awesome. Let's do it.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that is really needed the most in space is people that care. And to your point of like having a deep conversation, sometimes for someone else, like a super deep conversation to you might just be like, because it sounds like you're really well versed and you're just like, oh, cool. Like that little aha for you is like transformational for them seeing something big. Like we have to kind of like think back to maybe one of the very first times we took psychedelics and you're seeing your ego just puddle before you and someone open up and love themselves or forgive someone else. And they just need someone there to witness that and show up in a way where it's not judgmental or diminishing, just like, oh man, I'm really proud of you for doing that.
And it's almost easier for us if we're being held to have those experiences, right? Yeah. If we're just with ourselves, like our ego selves having that experience, we get scared. We don't want to happen. And then other parts in IFS or the protectors will come in, the firefighters will come in and like, calm you down, like bring you down from that experience. But if you have somebody there that's like holding space and knows how to hold space without that judgment that you're talking about, with pure compassion, and just be like, yeah, dude, experience that. I'm here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes like, you start to rub up against the edge of, like you mentioned, your tools, where you're like, oh, I don't know if I know how to handle this. So you got to go back to questions. Like questions are always good, just asking somebody. But I think that's just as a human, that's one of the really neat things, getting more like tools in the tool belt. Like when I've sat with a sitter and I've had a really challenging time or a big aha, and then I just bring them a problem. Like, I don't know. Here, what do I do with that? And, just getting like a really nice reframe perspective shift. I think it's sick that you found yourself in this, man. It seems like a really good fit for you based on what you're telling me so far.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah. And it is the tools, right? I got a whiteboard that has like all the tools I want to go get now that I know that this is like an avenue for me, right? Like, all right. Yeah. You got certification to be an integration coach, but like, can we add like internal family systems therapy to it?
Do you have an actual whiteboard with stuff on it?
Yes. Yeah. I'm a little bit older than you guys. I mean, in my real estate, everybody got these CRMs, and like in my real estate office, I would have whiteboards with all like my most active clients, so I don't forget to call them, because remembering to use the computer sometimes is hard for some of us.
Sometimes it's just a suck. I mean, I get on a computer to go do one thing. I'll be like, we go text Dylan, and then I pop up 2 hours later. I'm like, oh, yeah, what happened?
Right? I meant to open my CRM and send out some emails, but like all of a sudden I'm like down a YouTube rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
And next day shipping. Do you ever, with your coaching, I'm curious, and your DJ background, has that integrated to where, kind of like what he was talking about earlier, like maybe you don't have the answer, but you're like, I don't know, but Jimi Hendrix does. How about you kick back? We'll find out. You ever had that? Because you've got to have, a discography in your mind, and someone's going through something. You're like, actually, I think I got a tune for you.
It's interesting because my taste in music has changed. Clearing out a storage unit that was half filled with old music stuff kind of took me down memory lane. But I think like part of the evolution of music, and just as me as a soul, like it changes, right? Mm-hmm. And I think as far as the DJing part coming out of me, I think that was part of me getting lost a little bit in real estate. Is like I stopped music, and this re-emergence into this culture, and seeing how music could be is used, that has opened up me kind of going back into like, maybe not DJing on big stages like Burning Man or anything like that, but like more of creating like mixes or playlists for journey spaces or for yoga spaces. And it's a question I've been pondering. I was even brought this question to one of my circles yesterday. I was like, okay, how much of me creating this playlist for like, let's say a 5-MeO DMT journey, an hour-long session or an hour and a half long session, how much is that creating a playlist is me putting an agenda in someone else's journey?
I don't like that.
Yeah, I don't want to put the agenda in there. So it's like, but the curating a space for music is important too, right? So it was like, there's a fine balance between an agenda or creating a safe space for exploration.
Yeah. I said I don't like that out of reflex, because I think it rubs up against, if someone comes with the intention, again, I guess back to like the setting you mentioned earlier, like if someone comes into a space and they're like, hey, I want Ken to curate an experience for me. It's almost like consent at the door, right? Of like, I want you to take me on your journey and even see what comes of that.
Even if they feel like that, like, oh, my journey's being curated, I feel like if they're coming into this, right, let's say they're new to it, they're not, whatever experience you're going to put on it's not like you're putting on hard rock metal, right? Like they're going to get a good experience out of it. It might not be particularly exactly what they want, but you're also giving them ideas of being like, ooh, I don't like this, but I would actually like this, and then they can take that home with them. They're also learning from what you're putting out to them and creating their own ideas to take back.
Yeah, that's why it's a delicate dance, right? Like, okay, like I'm creating this playlist, and then when words are part of a song, like that is like, oh, okay, we have to be very careful there.
Mm-hmm.
Because and I guess to bring it back, they are coming to whoever's facilitation or who's ever guidance to have that experience, because they trust you.
Different flavors, right?
Yeah.
It's funny. This sparks a memory from over the weekend. Dylan, I don't know if you remember. So Abby and I, my wife and I, were on a hike this weekend, and I shared with her when Dylan and I and some other buddies were on the Appalachian Trail. I brought a speaker, and I was playing music, and at one point, we couldn't find I downloaded a ton of music, and everyone's, we're trying to find the itch to scratch, but we couldn't find either the scratch or the itch. It was just like, meh. And at a certain point, Dylan was like, we're in nature. Let's just turn the music off. Like, let's just enjoy nature. It was like a collective. Yeah, what are we doing? Why are we messing with the speaker? And then as we continue to go, we're trying to get to a summit that we're camping at. And we kind of go over, one false summit. We're like, oh, okay, like maybe it's right up there. And we get over that, and we're like, oh no, it's definitely got to be that one. As we eclipse that one, we see two more summits that we know. That last one's where we're going. And the last two have kicked our ass. And I think about that point is when Dylan goes, you remember that fuck shit you were playing earlier? If I could get that on right now, that would be great.
Motivation right now. Nature got me to this point. I need a little.
Yeah. So all that to say, it's like thinking about that experience of, if someone's really working through something challenging. I don't know what it is about music, but it moves the soul. It moves the frequency and the energy in us. And maybe sometimes if there's a knot that comes up, you having the background that you have, and maybe just that natural knack of what's going to move somebody through something, that could maybe need that knot a little bit, so to speak.
Yeah, I've been really thinking about that as I'm like designing these playlists lately. And that's kind of bringing back the DJ me back into like this space. It's like, okay, it's creating the set and setting, and it's creating the intention as part of it, right? It's not like I'm not trying to control in a sense. I'm just helping create a space through intentionality.
There's some interesting DJs. I think like LS Dreams one, where I've been at a festival where the night before he will absolutely just throw it down, right? But a lot of these big DJs are doing, if they stay overnight and hang out, they've been doing like sound baths. They call them sound baths the next morning. Totally mellow, very just like wavy music that just projects out. A lot of people are just laying down or doing yoga in the morning. And it's interesting because that's a new thing for a lot of DJs these days, doing that. And they're also trying to figure it out. And they've been like experimenting with it. That could be an interesting thing to look up. A lot of these big name DJs at festivals have been experimenting with exactly what you're doing, trying to figure out like a low, mellow thing to do.
Well, we're all aging. We can't rock it all the time, right? Like we're like, we got to find something that calms us down from living that lifestyle of bangers, right?
My tipper's going out.
Yeah. And I've seen some people like, I definitely have seen artists go down that path now more so. Like, okay, like I have this project, but now I'm gearing myself for this project, and it's more ambient, it's more spiritual, it's more journey work,
You mentioned your taste in music. I mean, naturally it evolves, right? But like what kind of music, when you're curating these playlists, like what kind of music, DJs, genres you've been looking into?
I've always really appreciated down tempo. Like, yeah, I could go, like, I used to play like sunrise sets, like random rab. Like, I've opened up for random rab a lot at music festivals and, emancipators and stuff like that. But even I think when I'm thinking about curating, I'm using less beat when I'm curating the space, and I'm getting more into like a hand pan, hand drum and stuff like that. Just kind of just making it more. So I'm not infusing people to have an experience. They're still, their experiences for themselves. It's just creating an ambiance. And so more of that ambient, more spiritual sounding stuff. I think Liquid Bloom or somebody like that comes to mind as somebody who kind of creates that space pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah. Liquid Blooms. That's that jam. I love it. So do you see yourself transitioning into integration full time, you think?
I think it has to be a combination of things. I think I'm not exactly sure where it's going. I know I'm going to always be in service of others. And I think integration is one of those tools, right? I think there's a lot more supply of integration coaches than there is a demand for it right now.
You think so?
I think there's a lot of people training integration coaches, right, to do this. And I think the model is like this hourly. You guys are like, I like how you guys talk about entrepreneur a lot, right? In this space. And it's like, people are like doing it for like these ketamine clinics or hiring coaches off in Indeed for $20 an hour.
Yeah.
Right?
That's beautiful to see capitalism at work, by the way.
Right. And so like coming from like this personal development space, this business space, and like, you know, I've forked over tens of thousands of dollars for high level coaching, you know, is that, can I create a business like that, a business model like that in this space? I think it's possible, but I think it has to be a combination of tools to build a brand on.
Yeah.
So I think coaching is a full-time passion and love. Psychedelics can be played a role in that platform of coaching, but is it the end all be all?
Yeah.
I don't know if that, I think it's just another tool in the toolbox.
I think that's a great way of looking at it. That's what I rubbed up against when I did some psychedelic integration, is you have people that inevitably at some point go, well, how do I get the medicine? And so you're kind of at this crossroads of like, well, I want to help you integrate, I want to help you support, and the, let's say, infrastructure of the way the legality is set up right now, it's like you're inevitably exposing yourself to some level of risk.
Right. And I've danced that dance before, and I don't know how much I want to dance that dance again. And because
catching the dragon, as Dylan would say, not chasing, catching the dragon.
Yeah. So like, how much marketing and advertising to like strangers can you do?
Right.
With that model.
Yeah.
Versus like, yeah, sweet, I have a coaching package for people who are part of my network or friends of the network. Medicine could be included in that package, right? But I can't just advertise. I feel at this state, I can't just advertise that to the world. Like, hey, here's a 3-month coaching practice that includes 2 MDMA journeys.
Mm-hmm.
I can't really like say that to the world. I guess I just did.
Link in bio.
But also, like, you know, I think there is, like, I live in San Diego. The border's right there, where you could get an ibogaine treatment and 5-MeO DMT followed by that, right? And I think that that kind of setting, you know, is available to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good Saturday.
That's more than a Saturday.
All right, you know. Horrible pitch idea. All right, horrible pitch idea. We have coaching for helping a lot of people navigate and whatever, right, through the psychedelic space. Now, what if people that have figured out the psychedelic space and they think they're hot shots now? It's not really coaching, but it's to throw you off your groove during a psychedelic trip.
Terrible pitch, and I love it. We'll call it bad trips only.
Bad trips only. You think you know what you're doing? You come on by. Let me show you what.
They get like a obstacle course for tripping, right? Just, almost got you.
Going on the Jim Carrey green mask.
Come over to my school bus.
These ain't lasers, buddy.
That would be so terrible.
That's a bad idea.
Sometimes it does feel that way, though. If you're in a group of people maybe you haven't tripped with before or something, and someone just gets a wild idea, and you're like,
there'd be a niche. There'd be people that'd be like, no, I can handle it. Nah, I got this.
All those years of trying to steer that school bus out of the ditch, finally you get to lean in and go, no, you know what? The YouTube video called Nightmare, I think actually that's a great one to put on right now. That's
That one person that's never really done well on psychedelics, you're like, hey man, I actually have a business idea for you.
You're going to be our leader.
Dude, you will have no idea how well you'll do.
I know you've been paid $20 an hour as an integration coach. We're prepared to ante that up to $200 an hour to just kind of do whatever you want.
Honestly. Sorry, off on a tangent.
Yeah, I mean, my bad, Kim. My bad. But so do you see the kind of the model evolving for what you're doing? It's just kind of like coaching as that, having that as an opportunity available inside the coaching?
Yeah. Well, right now it is my, like, what sets me apart in my coaching than like other personal development life coaches, right? Like, it's like, you know, you've had success in a business, you got some, but you kind of lost yourself as like, you know, your relationships might suck if you're like, but you're like, hey, I'm making $300K a year, but like, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? And they're like wanting to explore psychedelics to see if there might be something more meaningful for them in life. And so I think that's kind of what sets me and my coaching and the groups that I'm associated with apart from just a normal life coach that says, hey, I could, and coaches have so many different, you know, you get a business coach that's going to teach you how to grow a business, or you could get, you know, a life coach that might help you do it, you know, do life better or whatever, you know, or a relationship coach to help you do relationships better. And I think, you know, I think there's people out there who, now that psychedelics is being more talked about, they just want to feel safe doing it and make sure that they're in good hands while they're going through this transformational process. It's not like when we first started doing it, we're like, hey, your buddy gave you this, like, let's go. You know, people are actually putting a lot of thought into it now.
Yeah. I think too, as well, a couple things, and I was even thinking about this earlier when I was listening to you, is, you know, listening to you talk and listening to you talk about coaching and you getting into it. For one, I feel like what makes you also stand out apart is the way you're talking to, you're not talking fast, you're talking slow through the process, right? You sound like you're a very good listener through something and talking through somebody, right? You're also, and I don't mean this in a bad way, you're older, and a lot of coaches these days, I feel like you're younger and they're trying to give life experiences. And you've been through a lot of, like, professionally, through the hippie space and a lot of different areas that you've mentally been through, where a lot of people have been or going through now, and you can help talk them through things a lot better. And I feel like too, you know, out of a lot of coaches I've met, for you to actually say what makes me stand, no one a coach I've ever met has ever said what makes me different than the others. Everyone I've always heard talk about coaching, it's always kind of sounded the same. But you're the first one I've literally ever heard that's like, what makes me different is this. And I think that's, honestly, I think that's just really awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I didn't even catch on to that myself. So I'm going to lean into that. And I think that was me stepping into coaching. That was a part of it. There's a lot of coaches out there that want to give you advice. And I think in this space of coaching, what you commented on my listening skills, and there's like layers of like good listening and then asking questions. So it's not me giving you advice, it's me helping you find out what's within you that's true to yourself.
I feel like that's the hardest thing to do for yourself too. Like you were mentioning earlier around like that calling and tuning into that. And also further in the conversation, you know, 'cause I was curious, I'm like, how much do you want to lean into that calling? Because there's that tricky balance of timing and just the general market, right? Like if you were trying to bring this, I feel like in the early 2000s, because now we have like kind of the ability to market ourselves. It's this gray market area. So now you're just having to disseminate for yourself. Like how far do I want to push that angle of availability for coaching? So a lot of self-awareness is really what I'm trying to reflect back, is you're kind of seeing how you're being called to wanting to help mankind at large, but also honoring yourself at the same time of like, hey, what are the limitations? Like, where do I want to take this and still be in service of others? You know, what are my superpowers? What are my limitations? That's not the easiest thing to do in the world. Sometimes I feel like, I'll just speak for myself, you know, I sniff a calling and I just run in that direction, hit a wall and kind of run in the other direction, versus you're kind of taking the time to take stock of the landscape and approach it with a healthy amount of respect, let's say.
Oh yeah, thanks for that reflection. Because I've had that tendency. All right, this is the next thing I'm going to do. I'm going to go do it, right? And sometimes you hit the wall or you go another direction. But I think when you are able to attune to your higher self and understand like what that voice sounds like, and I think that's a very powerful tool that psychedelics are able to give you if you're able to like hear it, or if that's what you go into the medicine seeking. And that's how I found it. That's how I found like I'm all of a sudden I'm in a room with myself.
Mm-hmm.
And there's my ego and there's myself, and they're looking at each other, having a conversation right now, face to face.
Western standoff.
Yeah. There wasn't much of a standoff. It was just like, you know, here's the big consciousness that you are. Your little ego has nothing to do with what we're doing here. You're just getting in the way, you know. But that gave me the ability to be able to be more in tune to what that voice sounds like.
Sorry, the only thing I imagine is you said that and you're like, anybody want any beer? Be right back. I'll figure it out.
Go back in the room. Anybody need any snacks? Ego, you look a little worn out. I'd give you some water.
It's getting you in there. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, ego tried to come up with some words, and the words were not allowed there. We don't use words here.
Yeah. I think, you know, one of the other things I think about is like when you're in a safe space with people, like Dylan and I have tripped so many times together, and, you know, other buddies of mine, where it's cool that my go-to is humor. And when you're in a safe place, you'll feel that initial knee-jerk reaction of how you present yourself to the world or a coping mechanism. But kind of back to earlier when you're mentioning that sometimes just literally being a sitter for someone else where they can tell you care, they're able to be vulnerable in a space, they're not being judged. It allows that initial how you present yourself to the world to just kind of melt away and drop a bit, for maybe this other self that really wants to shine through, but is either scared or afraid or is presented and been hurt, ridiculed, etc. I think that, you know, there's a lot to be said for someone just showing up and just saying like, hey, I care about you and your experience. Don't worry about me. You know, tell me about that. You know, what'd you think about that? And just kind of going down a rabbit trail of what showed up for you there, and just continuing to ask. Like that's like the best feeling in the world, when someone's just locked in on you, especially with the afterglow or during a trip. Man, that's just a sweet feeling.
You know, from a place of curiosity and it takes too, like you have that knee-jerk reaction of wanting to like joke and smile, but then also having that realization that you're like, wait, I could actually, this is a space where I could go deeper and maybe bring up that stuff. And I liked how you said it earlier in the conversation. It was like, oh, I have this. What's this? Help me here.
Yeah.
Well, tell me about that. What is it?
Yeah.
You know? Oh, where do you think that comes from? When's the first time you remember having that feeling? And you just go down deeper and deeper and see why that part is so shy to show itself.
Mm-hmm.
When usually at the root of that is this a big ball of love that wants to be expressed or felt or seen or heard.
You ever had anybody try to show some weird ball of love and you go, hey, maybe you should put that back in the box? You ever had that?
Yes. Have I done that to somebody? Maybe subconsciously, but not in the settings that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right. You know, and I think that's what creates that trauma, that put the shield like you're like, oh, I have this big ball of love I want to share to people, but your knee-jerk reaction is to shy away from it with laughter or jokes or whatnot. And because somebody at one time in your life, probably a parental figure or aunt or uncle or somebody, was like, oh, no, don't do that. Boys don't cry.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it is, you know? Like you can't just be out here hugging everybody all the time. Someone told you that wasn't right, you know? Take a little MDMA and you're like, dude, let's just hug. Like, what are we talking about here?
Go buy that Millennium Falcon. You deserve that Lego. It's out there.
You've earned this. You're worthy of that Lego.
Have you ever had it too, where like someone says it was like it was a moment, and you need to be respectful of the moment, but man, you want to really laugh at that situation. You're like, ooh, that's a knee jerk. I want to laugh into that, but you're like, that's not. You can't right then. You know, it's important not to. But you're like, damn, that's funny.
Yes, there are those moments. You know, there are those moments for sure. I think sometimes a little laugh will help that moment too, because I'm definitely guilty of taking myself too seriously sometimes. You know, so having someone who invite laughter in my trip could always be, you know, hey, dude, this thing's not that real as it seems. Like, what are you doing?
We always say when Cole, what is it you always say when things get a little too serious? It's butterflies and rainbows.
Oh yeah,
it's butterflies and rainbows. Just repeats it to people like, hey, you don't need to go down that path right now. That's another.
Born out of necessity with my brother. Good God, took him to a theme park and just started rattling off nightmare fuel. And, you know, I let it go for a little bit. I was like, okay, you know, everybody's different strokes, different folks. But at a certain point, I don't know what he said, but it was super not chill. I was like, hey, man, I need some fucking butterflies and rainbows out of your ass right now. And he was like, oh, sorry, too much. I'm like, just letting you know, the collective field of consciousness right now is wanting to go in that direction. And you're really over there, okay? He's like, all right, cool. You know, so add that to the tool belt. I was like, you know what? If we're heading into a ditch, maybe we just butterfly and rainbow and see if we can steer that back on course, right? That direction.
And sometimes that's all what somebody needs, right? He didn't know he was down that rabbit hole, and you were just like, dude, how about some rainbows?
Yeah. There's been times where we've been at a music festival, and like most of us are having a good time, but you just start overhearing like 2 or 3 people in the group having it, and you're like, hey, buddy. You know, this crazy set. That's back at camp stuff.
Either that or not my problem. You know, just that phrase. You catch wind of somebody, you're tripping or something comes up or whatever. And like been at a park, it's definitely the music festival. We say that all the time. Something's going down. We're like, hey, not my problem. You know, just.
That's one that always works too. When someone stranger that you meet that like starts complaining about something else somewhere else. And then you're like, hey, not our problem. And then it just clicks in their head because they're tripping too. And they're like, oh yeah, that's not our problem. Why am I worrying about that? Like, I agree. Look at these lasers, dude.
Yeah. Right there.
And that could change them for the rest of their life. Every time they're like down a rabbit hole, it's like, oh yeah, it's not their problem. It's not my problem. Like, you know.
That's the neat thing about just altering your consciousness in general, right? It's like you kind of like open up the mind trap and allow something new to come in. There's the other side of it too, where you can rework something. I mean, I think this is what we can all agree on. I wouldn't say discuss it nauseum, but like psychedelics aren't a panacea. So it's like you do need to approach it with some trepidation of like, hey, you're opening yourself up to a lot of good influences and rewiring stuff, but also a lot of that stuff's kind of nonsense that you're making up. You're either undoing or redoing or allowing in. So yeah, I mean, butterflies and rainbows, not my problem. And also sometimes your mind is just a problem factory and you're tripping, you get down a rabbit hole of problems. And it's like the power of having someone else with a fire extinguisher, a mental fire extinguisher, go, hey, let's put that out.
What's your, for people that get into, because sometimes this happens and everyone's got a little different way of doing it. What's your way of helping people that get into a loop?
Good question.
That is a great question. Oh, there's something before that I wanted to comment on, but I lost it with such good question. I ask questions like you know, like I guess I have someone sat with me one time and I shot up like a bolt. I asked myself a question, which I didn't remember the question I asked myself in the moment until 2 days later that made me shoot up and be like, oh, what's that? There's something right here. There's something going on. And it was like in my gut. I was like, it was like some energy in my gut. I was like, what's going on here? And I was in the loop. And he was like, well, what is going on there? Right? Like, tell me, what does it feel like? And so instead of just ignoring the loop, it's like, let's go into the loop.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and if it's and I'd rather go into the loop. That taught me, like, hey, we could go into the loop and we could kind of see what is there to bring out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because sometimes if you ignore that loop, it might go away and it might come back.
Yeah, so I think it's very possible, or is this going to? To me, it's an opportunity. We're in this loop, and there's an opportunity to figure out the puzzle, right? Or figure out why it's showing up. And so let's go into it. Let's take this opportunity. We've entered a space where it's happening, so let's go into it and look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it kind of goes back to what you were mentioning about, you know, psychedelics could open up this place to rewire or reinforce. And that's this like critical learning window that's opened, or neuroplasticity that opens. And each medicine has a different window of opportunity. Yet if you enter that space and you're going to reinforce some of that negative behavior or some of that, you know, you've called it multiple different names, but it's just like that negativity that, like, some people are going to ketamine treatments because it's like, it's legal. You could go to a clinic and get ketamine, right? That window is open for 2 days. But if you're going there for depression and then that next day you're just like, see, this doesn't work. I'm always going to be depressed. You're just reinforcing that behavior versus creating this opportunity. And I think that's where coaches come in, or a good group of friends come in, like, hey, I'm going to have this experience, and this creates this opportunity to rewire. And so that loop that we're finding those people in gives us an opportunity to rewire. And a lot of people might be scared to go into the loop because they're just, especially if you're tripping with a friend at a festival and you see your friend going through a loop, you're just like, oh, I don't want to deal with that right now. Yeah. Blind spot. But we're like, okay, if you're brave and courageous, hey, okay, what's going on there? Tell me what's going on there. That might create this opportunity to rewire that instead of continue to repeat the cycle.
Definitely. And be willing to steer the trip. Go ahead, Dylan.
I was just like Colton, like you were saying, like, I feel like if you're within a group of friends and it's someone's first time doing it, or maybe, you know, early times doing it, you know, and you're with a group of friends that, you know, this person trusts you, you have to kind of be willing to take on that role if it does happen, right? I was in the early stage, I was afraid to help people that would get into the loop, but after myself going through the loop and people helping me, and eventually you end up wanting to help people in the loop. You're like, I know what that is. I know that's a scary feeling. Let me help this person. And like you're saying, I definitely think that's too, like, diving into the loop is way better of a situation than trying to figure out how to get out of it as quickly as possible. Because it just doesn't, feels like going into the loop is quicker to getting to resolve things than it is trying to force your way out of it.
Yeah. You might not want to deal with it at the time because you're like, dude, the next band that's what we're here for. You know?
Yeah.
But like you said, maybe it is the quicker being like, all right, what's going on there? Versus let's just try to ignore this guy and, hey, it's, rainbows and unicorns, not my problem.
Those are good bathroom walk talks. Let's just go to the bathroom real fast. Let's go talk about that real fast.
Get out of the crowd. Let's talk about what's going on. And sometimes you just lean in. Someone's really scared, but ideally they have the trust factor there. And it's like, all right, let's lean in. Let's talk about what's going on. And at a certain point, you go, look, it's not your problem. Now let's get back in there. Come on. So I think leaning in. But yeah, man, as we kind of land the plane here, Ken, I mean, is there anything we didn't touch on, or any kind of like leaving thoughts here?
I think you did a good job. We explored a lot of different terrain.
I think this is a good opportunity, Colton. Since you're kind of getting into this space, I think we got a good question for you. What's a question that you wish more people asked you?
Wow. Wow. You guys got me on that one. Long pause. So for some reason, I want to like bring it back to love, and self-love. Like, okay, what are some ways like to truly love ourselves better? So we can love others better.
Love that.
And if you were to answer that question, what are some ways?
Well, you would have to know the client, where they're coming from and what they're needing to work on, right? And why they were drawn to you.
That's a great answer to that as a coach.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, thinking about like ways to like tap into the present moment, but also recognizes like our previous selves and our future selves, and like this whole oneness and non-duality of time is a kind of like all of us have this like inner child in us, and to operate as we're caring for ourselves as if we were our own children.
That's beautiful. Well said, man. Mm-hmm. And so as a takeaway, I mean, if someone wanted to connect with you, potentially explore services or go deeper, just connect in general, like what's the best place for them to discover you?
I don't really have a public persona for this coaching yet. So I would just have them shoot me over an email. kd@kennethdonahue.com.
Perfect. We'll be sure to link that in the show notes too.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Other than that, hey, thank you, brother. Appreciate you coming on. Past this, guys, we will potentially have a break. I don't know if we have one. We might have another episode coming out next week. EDC is coming up for me. I'm sorry. You might be stuck with Dylan. I don't know. It might just be a solitary monologue of him talking to the camera. Maybe not. But either way, we have a few more guests coming up. And then after that, I got to do my work. But and my work being getting more guests on for you. So, hey, we love you guys, and we will see you next week. Peace.